The British Empire at its height ruled over nearly a quarter of the world's land and population. But how did a small island, separated from the European mainland, grow into a global superpower? Its rise was not by chance. It was a combination of geography, trade, military strategy, and political ambition. England's geography provided a unique advantage. Protected by the English Channel, it avoided the frequent invasions that plagued continental Europe. Fertile lands, abundant rivers, and a temperate climate supported population growth and agriculture. Its location encouraged seafaring traditions, with ports like Bristol, London, and Liverpool becoming hubs of maritime commerce. Isolation allowed political stability, fostering a monarchy capable of financing expeditions abroad while avoiding constant continental wars. By the late 15th century, England embraced the age of exploration. Innovations in shipbuilding, navigation, and cartography allowed daring voyages. John Cabot's expeditions to North America in 1497 opened new possibilities, while Sir Francis Drake circumnavigated the globe, raiding Spanish treasure fleets and mapping uncharted coasts. England learned not just to explore, but to seize strategic opportunities wherever they arose, blending adventure with economic and political foresight. The Royal Navy became the backbone of British expansion. By the 17th century, it was not only a defensive force, but an instrument of empire. Control of the seas meant protection for merchant fleets, the ability to blockade rivals, and rapid deployment of troops and supplies to distant lands. Naval victories at the Battle of Trafalgar and the defeat of the Spanish Armada cemented Britain's reputation as the dominant maritime power, making distant colonies feasible and profitable. Trade drove empire. The East India Company, chartered in 1600, was more than a business. It was a sovereign power with its own army, courts, and ability to negotiate treaties. The Hudson's Bay Company in North America and later the Royal African Company in West Africa established strategic trade networks, controlling furs, sugar, and even the transatlantic slave trade. England transformed commerce into conquest, using economic leverage to acquire territories and influence local rulers without full-scale wars in many cases. British colonization combined settlement, resource extraction, and strategic military positioning. In the Americas, the Caribbean, and Australasia, colonies were carefully chosen for climate, resources, and trade potential. Sugar plantations in the Caribbean, cotton in India, and tobacco in Virginia generated enormous wealth. Forts and ports like Bombay, Singapore, and Cape Town became linchpins of global control. Administration was structured to extract maximum profit with minimal European manpower, relying heavily on local intermediaries and military allies. Expansion was rarely uncontested. The British Empire grew through a series of rivalries and wars. The Anglo-Dutch Wars on the 17th century, the 7 Years' War in the 18th century, and the Napoleonic Wars reshaped the map of the world. The Industrial Revolution, beginning in the late 18th century, amplified Britain's imperial power. Factories churned out textiles, steel, and weapons at unprecedented rates. Steamships revolutionized transport, allowing faster movement of goods and troops. Railways and canals within colonies integrated distant territories into a single economic system. Telegraph networks provided real-time communication, making an empire spanning continents administratively manageable. Industrial might turn Britain from a maritime power into a global industrial and financial hegemon. Maintaining control over vast territories required more than armies. Britain exported its legal systems, education models, and administrative structures. Missionaries spread English language and culture, while local elites were co-opted into colonial administrations. The strategy of indirect rule allowed Britain to maintain influence with relatively small numbers of officials. Cities like Calcutta, Nairobi, and Sydney became centers of British culture and governance, demonstrating the empire's soft power alongside its military might.
Supplies. All were scarce. Only one shell to fire at each practice. The women of Britain refused to be left out.
We'll in this too. We'll put up the barrage balloons. Man the ack-ack guns. We'll run the railroads and get the trains through on time. Ferry the planes. Carry the dispatches. Drive drive the ambulances and run the buses. And we'll see that our men are fed and don't go hungry.
Others work, men and women alike.
The empire's growth was also opportunistic. Britain controlled key maritime choke points, Gibraltar, the Suez Canal, Singapore, and the Cape of Good Hope, allowing dominance over global trade routes. Resources like India's cotton, Africa's gold and diamonds, and Caribbean sugar fueled both industry and naval power. The ability to extract wealth while investing in logistics and defense created a self-reinforcing cycle of expansion and influence. The British Empire's expansion was the result of vision, innovation, strategy, and exploitation. It left an indelible mark on law, culture, trade networks, and geopolitics. Yet it also brought conquest, displacement, and inequality, shaping the modern world in complex ways. Understanding its rise helps us comprehend the global interconnections, trade systems, and political structures that continue to influence nations today. The story of the British Empire is a story of ambition, ingenuity, and adaptability. From a small island into a global network of power, Britain reminds us how strategy, technology, and commerce can reshape the world. It is a legacy that continues to echo across continents centuries later. What if the British Empire returned today? Global politics, economy, technology, and culture have shifted, but could an empire like Britain's ever rise again? Today, sovereign nations, international law, and organizations like the United Nations make traditional imperial conquest virtually impossible. A modern British Empire would face unprecedented diplomatic resistance. Alliances, treaties, and nuclear deterrence would prevent any nation from exerting unchallenged control over another. Instead of territorial conquest, economic dominance would define a modern empire. London's financial markets, global corporations, and technological investments could become instruments of influence. Globalization would make this empire less about flags and more about networks and capital. Technology would be the empire's true weapon. Cyber capabilities, artificial intelligence, space exploration, and control over data networks could give Britain influence comparable to territorial empires of the past. A modern empire would rely heavily on culture. English as the lingua franca, media, entertainment, and education could serve as tools of subtle influence. Global brands, universities, and cultural institutions could project British values and norms, creating a network of soft power that shapes societies without direct rule. History shows that empires endure longest when they win hearts, not just battles. While traditional colonies may no longer exist, strategic military bases could provide influence. Imagine the Royal Navy controlling critical sea lanes, Air Force deployments at key points, and cyber capabilities acting as a deterrent. Control over choke points like the Suez Canal, Malacca Strait, or the Panama Canal would remain as valuable today as ever, but the stakes are higher, with global powers ready to respond. A return of the British Empire would spark immense ethical, social, and political challenges. Sovereignty, democracy, and human rights are deeply entrenched values today. Any attempt at imperial resurgence would provoke global outrage, resistance, and conflict. It's a thought experiment as much as a warning. The age of traditional empires is over, replaced by networks of influence, diplomacy, and interdependence. So what if the British Empire returned? Not as a collection of colonies, but as a network of economic, technological, and cultural power. Its influence might be subtle, yet pervasive, shaping the world through finance, innovations, and ideas. The question forces us to ask, in a globalized, interconnected world, what does it really mean to be an empire? If you like this, subscribe to my little channel and stay informed, stay curious.